Let's talk about empowering yourself, the top few coping skills to survive your narcissistic, difficult, or high conflict parent. So let's start with don't please the unpleasable, and set boundaries and start small. And let me just give a little disclaimer about this before we start. If you're listening to this, you've probably tried a bunch of things already and you probably feel frustrated. So the goal with these coping skills is not to hold you to perfection, because progress with dealing with your difficult parent can look different than sometimes we even think it should. And that's something we often talk about in my workshops and in therapy. But when we say don't try to please the unpleasable, what we mean is oftentimes if you had a narcissistic parent, you often want to stay in their good graces. You want things to be copacetic. You don't want conflict. So there may have been cycles of you trying to better things with your parent, to try to find a way to repair the problem with them. But one of the things we come to find is it's not really a problem you can repair, and it's not really on you to repair it. And it can be totally exhausting. And sometimes I equate this to like the idea of dating someone who tells you, if you don't change this about yourself, we're done. And the reason I say that is because it's difficult to be in any dynamic where someone needs you to be a certain way or else. And I think that's a lot of times how people feel in their relationship with their narcissistic parent. So you may have found yourself in a cycle of making things better with your parent, trying to find a way to repair the problem. But the difficulty with that is you're not the problem, and it's not really something you can repair. And honestly, it can be totally exhausting. Think about a bad relationship you've been in, and I'm sure you can recall, and if it wasn't you, maybe a friend of yours that said, they said if I don't change this about myself, we're done. And I think we equate that to being in a relationship with a narcissistic parent, because you feel like you're under threat. If you don't conform to them, then you can't be in the relationship at all. And that's hard to live with. So really, this coping skill is about taking a step back and thinking about the ways that you have been putting a lot of efforts to please them and figuring out where you can pull back. Maybe you can stop picking up their groceries every Friday. Maybe you can stop having these mandatory dinners with them, whatever it might look like for you. And again, all these things are nice on the surface, but if you feel like you're trying to work on empowering yourself and being in a different relationship dynamic, it could look like those examples. It could look like something else. Number 2 is set boundaries and start small. And let's be honest, it's probably felt next to impossible to set boundaries because narcissistic people often view their adult child as an extension of themselves. And as such, kind of the idea of you being in service to them. So cut yourself some slack about this because it's not easy. I work with a lot of people, as I mentioned before, they're assertive in other areas of their life, but it baffles them that they can't do it with their parents. And that's okay. They're difficult to deal with. That's why we're here. But we have to make it okay to change your mind and to say no. An example might look like don't pick up the phone right away with them. Set a timer and remind yourself to call them back 3 hours later the next day. Or another example might be if they offer you an out. I'd love to see you on Thanksgiving, but you don't have to come. You can actually decide that it's okay to then say, no, I won't come, or maybe I'll come for 20 minutes before I go to my friend's place. So those are just 2 examples, but really the crux of this is the minute that you feel guilty or apologetic, if you say, oh, I'm so sorry I can't come, or oh, I'm so sorry I didn't pick up the phone, they're gonna pounce on that, right? That is another thing we'll talk about is maybe in other relationships we would be mindful to say, oh, I'm sorry I didn't do that, but a lot of times the sorries or apologies are viewed as weakness and viewed that you do owe them, and then that cycle, the narcissistic cycle kind of comes in and oftentimes leaves you feeling really frustrated. So let's talk about number 3, which sort of goes with number 2, which is finding coping statements to reframe situations ahead of time. So you've probably heard, you're the worst, or you don't love me, or you don't care about having me in your life. And having experienced it a lot of times in my life, I can tell you firsthand, it stings. And when these incidents happen, it makes me start to question my character and even my own identity. But this is something we want to start to reframe, is these conflictual situations. We want to understand that they're going to be expected. Now, I'm not saying that they should happen, but just we don't want to be so shocked when they did. And I guess what I'm trying to say is now I view conflict as inevitable. They're high conflict people. So I understand that there is no perfect way to structure communication, contact, do more for them, do less for them, that would make me be able to completely avoid it. It's not about me. In essence, expecting the difficult parent to change is unlikely. Again, it's not impossible, but it's unlikely. So what I do work on with people is having a coping ahead plan ready. Some phrase you tell yourself, like, this isn't about me, they have a mental health disorder, or this hurts, but I know I've done the best I could, or my happiness and mental health takes precedent over trying to resolve this with them right now. Now, this isn't gonna happen overnight. This pattern has likely been going on your whole life, so even if you just notice the phrase kind of going through your mind in this moment of conflict, that's already progress, because you have more awareness of the cycle and you have the path to empower yourself again. You might even post these statements somewhere on a sticky note where you can be reminded of them. So the other thing I wanted to mention as a coping skill is just the idea that taking small or an indefinite break from contact is okay. You can always reevaluate that later, but I think a lot of times I want to just say this statement because a lot of times people have been in this cycle for so long that it feels unacceptable to them that they could ever need a break from their parents. So we're giving you the right that if you ever need that there would be no judgment, and actually it can be healthy, but that's a personal choice that you have to make, and you can discuss this with your coach or therapist or in a workshop or group. But no one can really decide this for you, and I want to emphasize there's really no right or wrong here. It depends on your specific situation. So the last thing is get ongoing support. And look, I want to be honest, I fell into this niche as a therapist because it's something I dealt with and on occasion still deal with. But what I realized more importantly is there was a need for support because this doesn't end. Yes, even if you go no contact, but even then there's still grief and loss to manage. But it's also something that we've often felt isolated in and felt like there wasn't a lot of people that could understand, and it's not a wound that heals in a linear manner. So don't feel ashamed or embarrassed of seeking whatever help you need. You can talk to a therapist, you can come to a workshop or get coaching from me, you can go to a 12-step support group like ACA or Al-Anon, but cocoon yourself in as much support as you need because it can really help the healing process. Like and subscribe for more.